Hi everyone, I'm Shelley and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another Question the Narrative video, and today's topic is rearranging history, quote, spy planes, and some viewer comments. Now, a lot of times when I come up with the topics for my videos, it is something that I have been really mulling over for the past week, something that I've really been delving deeply into. But sometimes there are many topics that just come springing at me from many different places, and they're things that are so interesting that I just want to share them all with you. So that's really what I'm going to do today. And most of what I'm sharing with you today is actually coming from my viewers or from friends. They're coming from other people who know that I just really get into this stuff. Before we get into that, though, let me just show you what I found today that I found pretty interesting. So, pretty interesting and pretty comical, to be quite honest. Blinken postpones trip to Beijing after Chinese spy balloon spotted over U.S. Now, what does this look like to you, my friends? To me, that looks like a satellite. And what is attached to that satellite? Why, it's a balloon. So let's just look at a similarity between this and here is an image of a satellite. Now, of course, there are some differences, but there are many different styles of satellites, and let's just look mainly at these. This is what we're looking at. And the reason that I'm pointing this out to you is just because I was discussing this with a friend today, and we both think that what happened was that some civilians got footage of a, quote, satellite that was too good and showed the balloons, and they just tried to pull it off as what is it being called again? A Chinese spy balloon, because they don't want us to know that our, quote, satellites are really just balloons that are just floating higher in the atmosphere. In fact, where does it say this? Was it this one? High altitude surveillance balloon. And that really, my friends, that's where I think that all of our satellites are. They're just high altitude balloons, and they were just doing a cover up. So I just wanted to share that with you. So the first thing that I'm going to talk to you today is about Stonehenge, because I've discussed this in another video, and I talked about the New England Stonehenge, and I got so many great comments from people telling me about other Stonehenges around the world. And someone on Instagram actually sent me these really interesting photos, and these were taken in the 1930s, and it certainly looks like Stonehenge being constructed. Now, I'm not going to say that this is when Stonehenge was being constructed, because we definitely know that Stonehenge was around before this. What it does show, though, is that Stonehenge is being rearranged. It is being altered. Here we have some more photos. And forgive me, I was going to say forgive me if I go to other ones, because I don't have any rhyme or reason to these photos. Here's another one. I just can't get over how well people dressed in those days. That's just one of those things, when we're talking about resets, and, this was a bit later than the reset time, but still, people just were so much classier in those days. So I was talking about this with my friend, and she actually found let me just show you the pictures that she showed me first, because she found some really great photos. This was actually from the person who sent it to me on Instagram too. From far away, it looks like a policeman, like an old style policeman standing up there. But the point is that when we look at things, when we visit monuments, when we visit megaliths or pyramids, we think that we're looking at them as they were. And that is not what we are looking at. We are looking at them as they have been reconstructed. And so sometimes there might be good reasons to be rearranging these things and reconstructing them. For example, if they're, posing some sort of hazard, that they could be dangerous because they are at risk of falling. But if there are other reasons beyond that, I think that we need to leave well enough alone. And what I'm finding is that it is not all about hazards that are causing these people, whoever decides to move these monuments, that's not the only reason that it's happening. So right here, my friend found this, 7 new discoveries about Stonehenge. And again, we see that it is being moved around, reconstructed, revitalized, who knows what they call it. And I will leave a link in the description box to this article because I'm not going to read the entire thing. I actually just want to get to number 7. But let's just read the introduction here. Stonehenge and its surrounding landscape have seen an unprecedented amount of research in the last decade. One of the most significant strands of this has been Historic England's survey of the stones, the surrounding earthworks, and the hidden archaeology. This research has involved a combination of non-intrusive techniques, although I don't think that moving them around is considered non-intrusive, but that probably has nothing to do with the research going into them. Anyway, analytical survey of upstanding monuments and buildings, aerial photography, LiDAR and geophysical survey, and laser scanning. At the same time, several universities have been carrying out independent research involving international cooperation. That's interesting. All this has allowed us to develop a new appreciation of the Stonehenge landscape, not only in its Neolithic and Bronze Age heyday, but from early prehistory to the present day. And then it's going to go on to some of the new discoveries. So, first of all, I'll just read through them, but I'm only going to focus on number 7. North Barrow, possibly the oldest element of Stonehenge. A geophysical survey reveals many henges. Arch marks reveal holes of missing stones. New discoveries of carvings on stones, so that's like right here. Significant Roman activity at Stonehenge, and that's something that I might actually want to focus on sometime in the future. A place of execution, and this is one of those things that I was, discussing with someone the other day, is that a lot of times when we are told by archaeologists, anthropologists, historians what happened in ancient history, they are presenting things to us as if they are fact, when in fact they are just hypothesizing. They are drawing conclusions based on what they're finding, but they really don't know ahead of time. And very often, they always seem to focus on religion. They think that everything has to do with religion, and it very well could. But I think that what we also need to realize is that if someone would happen to see the Statue of Liberty 1,000 years from now, if they would find the ruins of the Statue of Liberty, if they have the mindset that historians do today, where everything is focused on religion, they will look at that Statue of Liberty and they will say, wow, this civilization worshipped this goddess right here. Because that is really what historians do now. So yeah, so we're looking at that as maybe a place of execution. It could have been. I'm just adding that. Here we go, though. Early 20th century alterations. And the caption says, Stonehenge prior to any restoration. So this is prior to restoration. And this is the straightening of Stone 56 in 1901. So let's just read this one here. During the First World War, the down to the west of Stonehenge became an aerodrome, and hangars were built within 500 meters of the monument. The furor over the future of the aerodrome and its buildings after the war fueled a wider debate that was already raging about the preservation of Stonehenge and its setting. New research by Historic England has revealed the tortuous course of this controversy. The first restoration at Stonehenge, the straightening of Stone 56, took place in 1901. Further restoration and extensive excavation took place in the 1920s and 1950s. This was always contentious, but driven by the Ministry of Works and the Society of Antiquaries. I don't know if I said that right. The process had irresistible force. As a result, Stonehenge was subjected to more alterations during the 20th century than at any point since the Bronze Age. So that right there. More alterations during the 20th century than at any point since the Bronze Age. Now, on the surface, that already is alarming. You think to yourself, wow, why have there been so many alterations in the 20th century? But the question that I have is, how do they know? that it had more alterations in the 20th century than during the Bronze Age. Again, that's more speculation that is being presented as fact. But let's just continue. While it is not true, as some have claimed, that Stonehenge is effectively a 20th century creation, the monument and its surroundings are not frozen in time. Their continually changing appearance is tied to, and here we go, here are the reasons, changing ideas on aesthetics. Yeah, aesthetics, my friends. Historical authenticity, which, okay, is important if you actually know the way that it's supposed to be, and inevitably visitor management. So that's a little troubling if you ask me. And I know a lot of people think that Stonehenge is a recent creation, but I do have some photos that, at least on the surface, seem to be from hundreds of years ago that do depict Stonehenge in paintings that I will show you in a bit. I just also wanted to go over this other article with you that my friend found, and that is not it. Visions of the past, how far should we go in restoring ancient monuments? And here is another one of, again, the restoration, or I call it reconstruction, of Stonehenge. And Stonehenge is but one example of how this happens. And I've talked so many times about how history is rearranged. And yeah, it can't be denied. And I don't think that there are any really good excuses that can be made for it, because every time that you rearrange these structures, these megaliths, these buildings, you are taking away pieces of history that the very people who are moving the things around are claiming to be preserving. So it really is, it's ironic that they are doing that. But let's just read this. To most of us in the 21st century, the architectural ruins of the past possess somewhat of a magical aura. While the humans who built them have long since turned to dust, the buildings they left behind act as a portal through which we might better understand our long-dead ancestors, or alternatively allow us to mistakenly overlay our own beliefs upon them. And yeah, that happens too. That's exactly what I was just talking about. But until the 20th century, many of these ancient ruins stood in disrepair, whether due to their remoteness or lack of the industrial machinery to fix them, as the image below of the Mexican site of Chichen Itza shows. It is only in recent times that we have been able to represent these sites in pristine condition. So this is what Chichen Itza looked like before its restoration. And this is what it looks like now. So when people go to visit places like Chichen Itza, they think that this is the original structure, when in fact that is a restoration, and this is how it actually looked. So I think we really need to be careful about believing everything that we see. But how far should we go in rebuilding ancient sites, and how does the work we have done so far impact on our understanding of ancient cultures? Take, for example, the Stonehenge of the 19th century compared to the site now. So here again, we have what it looked like in the 19th century and what it looks like now. In placing the fallen megaliths into place, are we modifying both the past and the passing of time? And if we have done it, who else has done it since Stonehenge was first constructed? That is my question exactly. How often have they been doing this? What have they hidden in the process, whether intentionally or unintentionally? Maybe it's time that we start actually keeping our hands off of stuff and leaving things as they are. Alternatively, are we simply helping to preserve an important site for the future? But how far do we go to preserve things? The legs of the Great Sphinx in Egypt have become more brick than stone in recent years. Given that restorations have been happening for millennia, it does raise the question, at what point does the original disappear and a facsimile take its place? And I think that much of what we are looking at nowadays, when we are looking at, quote, ancient historical sites, we are looking at facsimiles. We're not looking at the real deal. This idea is taken to its limit when it comes to sites such as Newgrange in Ireland. The gleaming white wall that surrounds the entrance to Newgrange is a modern construction, despite the fact that debate continues as to whether the quartzite rocks found on the site were actually used to form a wall or something else, such as a plaza surface. So this is what it used to be like. This is a reconstruction. But perhaps concerns over our vandalism of ancient structures is an illusion. After all, in another 4 millennia, we will be considered yet another ancient people who modified an even more ancient structure, just as King Tutmosis IV's repairs to the Sphinx 1,000 years after its construction, or at least the orthodox date of construction, have now become a part of the monument as we know it. Or, thousands of years from now, will they be saying that they're the only ones that have been restoring things or rearranging things? We don't know. We don't even know how close to the real thing we're looking at when we visit these places. So I'm just going to go to some more of these photos from Stonehenge. Now, when I looked this up, I believe this is from the 17th century. And so right here is a map of Stonehenge. Let's see. I don't know. Remember. We'll get to that in a minute. This one is one of my favorites because it clearly shows what looks to be a giant placing the top rock onto Stonehenge. And a lot of people will ask, if we go off of what historians tell us about the sort of technology that they had in those days, how were they able to put these humongous rocks on top of each other? And one speculation is that it could be giants. And right here we have what certainly looks to be like a giant placing this up here. What is that called? A cap piece on the 2 rocks. Here are just some children standing on Stonehenge, because apparently in those times you could still do stuff like that. And that right there, it just disrupts the integrity of the place. That is something else. Let me go back to the other pictures I wanted to show you. So here we have some photos of what I believe is the Acropolis. And there is another one in Athens. This one is from 1848. And I'm going to quickly pass that one. And here is another one in 1870 of the Acropolis. Now here, though, is what clearly looks to be some sort of, again, renovation or restoration happening to the Acropolis. For what reason? I do not know. So this actually, I'm not even saying that there was any sort of restoration on this, although I'm sure there was at some point. But this I actually find just plain interesting. So this is a pyramid in Rome. I am going to just let you know right off the bat that I had no idea that there was a pyramid in Rome. I have never been to Rome. I have never heard of it before. But what I find the most interesting, other than the fact that there is a pyramid in Rome, is that there is also what looks to be a medieval castle right next to it. And so just the notion of these two very different, what we're told, time periods just like plopped right next to each other in a place that is already filled with other types of ancient architecture. I just find that to be really amazing. And here's just a rendering of, you can see the pyramid here, and you can see the castle. It looks down here like it says August 19th. So I don't know if that means August 19th or if it means 1919 that it was rendered, 1819. I'm actually not sure of the date of this one. And this is what it looks like today. It's the Pyramid of Cestius. So again, it actually looks pretty similar. At first, when I was looking at this, I thought that it looked a bit ragged. But what I actually think this was like vines and vegetation on the outside of the pyramid, because I saw some more modern ones that had that whether it's moss, I'm not sure what it is, but it was something green on the outside. So I don't think that was actually erosion. Although it looks to be here, at least on these sides, like that is not there anymore. I just wanted to share that with you. Oh, here's, yeah, that you can tell that that's plants. And this is from 1860 to 1880. Although looking at it, it's hard to tell because they're black and white photos. Yeah, forget it. There was definitely some restoration done to that also. So that fits right in with this topic, doesn't it? All right, now on to Easter Island. So I was always fascinated with Easter Island as a child. I actually carved a little Easter Island figurine out of a piece of soap once. But so lots of people visit Easter Island because of these massive statues of people all over the island. And here's some more. Man atop a Moai lava stone effigy. So these are called effigies on the slope of a volcano in Easter Island in 1936. So he's sitting up there. I bet you they wouldn't let you do that now anymore. And here is another one. But here you go. Scientists make Easter Island statue walk. And so they do actually move these effigies and they put them in places where they want them to be. And I actually did have a photo. It's not in here for some reason, but when they dig down, these effigies, they're not just ground level. They are actually down into the ground. They're much bigger than what we see. So I'll have to try to find that photo again one of these days. So my oldest son actually sent me this photo this morning. He is in Iceland right now. He was on vacation there this past week and he's going to be coming home tomorrow. But he thought that I would like this, and it is a statue of Leif Erikson in front of a church. And I looked it up. It's an evangelical Lutheran church. I knew that it was not an old church because of the architecture, because I'm sorry, but that architecture is an eyesore, and usually if it's an eyesore, it means that it was more recent, and I looked it up, and it was completed in 1986, so that makes sense. Okay, so forgive me if I repeat anything, but I had a little bit of an interruption. My daughter came home, and I did not expect her to. So this is actually in Reykjavik, which most things in Iceland are, at least that's what it seems like for sure. And I know that I'm going to butcher the name, but it is the Hallgrímskirkja Church. And it is an evangelical Lutheran church. And so I decided to look up a little bit about it. For example, I wanted to see how old this statue of Leif Erikson was. So what I discovered was that it is actually a gift from the United States to Iceland. So let me just show you the article that I found about this. So 10 fascinating facts about the statue of Leif Erikson. That's just how I'm going to say it. So the statue was a gift to Iceland from the U.S. And this whole thing is very, very intriguing. So the statue of Leif Erikson was a gift from the United States to Iceland to commemorate the 1,000-year anniversary of Alþingi, the Parliament of Iceland. It was first convened at, I don't know, Þingvellir in the year 930 AD. The statue was designed by American sculptor Alexander Sterling Calder, who won a 1929 competition for the design of the monument. Now, I have to point out that the reason that I am laughing about this is because it seems that in, I'd say, the 19th century and the early 20th century, they were always throwing contests to see who could design these just really, really important monuments and structures. Like even if you ever saw my video on the Crystal Palaces, many of the Crystal Palaces were supposedly designed by people who had basically no professional experience in architecture, but they won contests. So that's why I'm kind of laughing a bit at this, because it was a 1929 competition for the design of the monument, which, if we look at it though, didn't they do a competition for the new World Trade Center building So, I mean, not to say that it's unheard of, but it's just funny that that keeps popping up over and over again. Um, it is also one of Calder's three best-known works, the other being George Washington as President on the Washington Square Arch in New York City and the Swan Memorial Fountain in Philadelphia. It has an identical brother statue in Newport, Virginia. When Iceland participated in the 1939 New York, that should be World Fair, it requested permission to make a copy of the statue of Leif Erikson to display in the Icelandic pavilion. Permission was granted, an identical copy was made using the original plaster casts, which were being preserved at the Smithsonian, our favorite institution in New York. After the World Fair, some wanted to locate the statue in Washington, D.C. I think they mean relocate, maybe. But instead, it was placed by the entrance. Someone needs to proofread this. To the Mariners Museum in Newport, Virginia, where it still stands. And it talks about how much it weighed, which I don't find that interesting, but maybe some of you do. This is the one that really got me. Icelanders interpreted the gift as an official recognition Leif was Icelandic, not Norwegian. Actually, that wasn't the one that I was talking about, but yeah, apparently there was a controversy over whether Leif Erikson was Norwegian or whether he was Icelandic. And I believe his father was born in Norway, but he was born in Iceland. Let's see. Okay, this is it. The school cairn, then the best-known landmark in town, had to be demolished to make way for the statue. So, let me repeat that. The school cairn, then the best-known landmark in town, had to be demolished to make way for the statue. So isn't it funny that I'm doing this video on rearranging history and just restoration and reconstructing monuments, and then my son happens to send me a picture of something that they actually had to destroy an old monument in order to put it in its place. But let's find out why that happened. One of the reasons the statue was controversial was that to erect it, authorities had to tear down the school cairn, a small tower which was located on top of the hill, roughly where the statue is located now. And it doesn't even say here where. Trying to find where that happened, where I saw that. Okay, got it. So, Leif Erikson's monument was very controversial. The primary reason for the delay in erecting the statue of Leif Erikson was that the U.S. had insisted it be erected in a prominent place, specifically requesting the top of, I'm not even going to try to say it, hill, at the end of that street. So they specifically insisted that it be placed there, right there. At the time, the statue would have crowned the small town of Reykjavik, whose eastern limit was on the eastern slopes of the hill. Many Icelanders were extremely critical of this location, and as they should have been, because if you're giving someone a gift, well, at least in my opinion, you shouldn't be insisting that they put it in a specific place. It's pretty pushy, if you ask me. Anyway, and pompous. But anyway, the majority of city councilmen and many citizens felt the top of this hill was an inappropriate location, seeing the statue and the U.S. demands for its location as bordering on rude. It didn't border on rude, it was rude. And as an American, I can say that. Many also believed that locating the statue on top of the hill would upset plans for the hilltop, which included a large square and the construction of Hallgrímskirkja Church. So anyway, they ended up not putting it at the very top of the hill, though, but they put it slightly to the west. But anyway, the majority of city council, therefore, wanted the statue placed on Lagaholt Hill, east of a recreational area, which at the time was far outside the city limits. Others wanted Iceland to decline the gift altogether, arguing that in any case, there were no trucks in Iceland capable of transporting the statue from the harbor to the hilltop. But of course, the U.S. would have none of this and insisted the statue be placed exactly there. And finally, an agreement was reached. The statue was not placed on the very top of the hill, but slightly to the west, leaving ample room for behind it for the future Hallgrímskirkja. So, yeah, there was a school cairn that was destroyed, and that was a monument so that they could put this, not this statue, but the one that I showed you. This one right here. Yeah, so yet another example, and I'm not saying that the school Karen was like anything like really important. I'm not really sure what it was, to be honest. I searched it and wasn't able to find the specific school Karen that was up here on the hill, but it's just the sheer fact that these things happen all the time, and a lot of times we don't even think anything of it. Now, though, I just wanted to go to an email. And I know I thank everyone for sending me the emails. If I don't answer you, it doesn't mean that I'm not reading it. It just means that I haven't had time to answer you. So I do appreciate all of the emails that you're sending to me. I'm going to read this one today, and I'm just not going to send or include the name because I didn't get to email this person to ask her if I could use her name. So let's read this. You are on trails I have been on for the past 4 decades. I love listening to your videos. There was a book I found in a Christian bookstore back in the early 80s which went in depth about many of the things you talk about. I no longer have that book. What was odd about the book is it looked very old, even though the store where I bought it sold only new books. I then found this book a few years after the first book. The first book was better, but this one is still good. America BC, Ancient Settlers in the New World. And so I actually did click on that, so you can take a look at that here. I'll leave a link for this in the description box if you would want to buy this. I'm certainly going to be putting this in my cart. Let's just see what it says here. The first major work to penetrate the mysteries of ancient settlers in the New World. I want to actually read. There's reviews. I was looking for a summary, unless I skipped it somehow. It just says presents evidence indicating the early settlement of regions of North America by Celts, Iberians, Basques, Phoenicians, Libyans, and Egyptians. Yes, this is definitely a book that I need to get. Anyway, I have been to many places you have talked about. One of them is Predjama Castle in Slovenia. The one thing I found interesting there is the steps in the castle. You can go up steps which go into the cave the castle is built into. The steps are huge, easily for a giant of at least 15 feet tall. I did not climb up there, but my niece did. It was like she was rock climbing. The rest of the steps there are more in scale for people our size. They say Slovenia was where the last dragon was slain. So I decided to just, first of all, this is Predjama Castle, and I actually talked about this in another one of my videos because my question is whether it was purposely built like this or if some sort of catastrophe happened that caused this to maybe come down onto this castle. Now, there's another view of it. And so this castle, they say, is built right into the cave. I was trying to find photos of the steps, and all I could find was the normal set of stairs. I searched on DuckDuckGo and was not able to find any of the larger stairs. I would love, if anyone has any photos of something like that, I would love to see that. But this is all that I was This is all that I was able to find. But yes, I would definitely love to see that. Though where I live in Southwest Ohio, there is a town where they say a dragon still lives and has been seen as late as the 1880s. And so I clicked on this right. The Ohio dragon. And I believe that the reason that she brought this up was because I had mentioned how my 2 oldest daughters insist that they once saw a dragon flying in the sky back when we still lived in the city. Anyway, the Ohio Dragon, an authentic tale of a monster in Warren County. And, I have to say, this is actually, it's St. George and the Dragon. That's what this painting is. St. George himself, there's a lot of interesting lore surrounding him. St. George, he was for England, and before he killed the dragon, he drank a pint of English ale out of an English flagon. So, in 1882, one of those pivotal years again, the Cincinnati Enquirer reported a huge snake-like animal with 4 legs terrorizing the residents of Waynesville, Ohio. Described as being able to erect itself to a height of more than 12 feet, it sounds like a dragon, minus the wings. The following is a verbatim transcript of the article. Now I'm going to show you that you can click on this and it will take you to the actual article. You just have to start a free trial in order to be able to read it, but you can read the actual article if you would choose to do that. But since it is here, I'm just going to read it here because I don't need a free trial. Anyway, so snakes, an authentic tale of a monster in Warren County, remarkable capers of the reptile, a whole neighborhood alarmed. Waynesville, Ohio, May 29th. Although this is an old, settled neighborhood and the primitive snakes in the main have long since disappeared, except the black garter and rattlesnake, and occasionally some of other species, we are once in a while greeted with the report of some monster of this uncanny tribe. For several years, it had been reported that the track of one above the town of unusual size had on different occasions been seen in the dust, where it had crossed the pike. This report made the timid fearful, while the generality of the people did not seem to fear or care anything about it, and it has been reserved until yesterday to develop one of the most remarkable specimens ever seen, in or out of snake season, and the story thereof is so well authenticated that the more incredulous of the neighborhood on big snake stories are forced at last to lend an attentive ear. About 1 mile north of this place is a little village called Crosswicks, in which several colored families reside. Remember, this was written in the 19th century, so I don't want anyone coming at me and yelling at me for reading this. Among the rest is John Lynch, who has 2 boys, Ed and Joe, aged respectively 13 and 11 years. These boys were at a small creek on the south side of the village fishing yesterday. After sitting on the bank a short time, they heard quite a stir among some old reeds, grass and brush behind them, and on looking round they saw a huge monster approaching them rapidly. They screamed and, paralyzed almost with horror, started to run, when the snake, or whatever it might be, for they never saw aught like it before, came close up to the older one, and suddenly throwing out 2 long arms or forelegs, seized the boy in its slimy embrace, simultaneously producing two more legs, about 4 feet long, from some mysterious hiding place in its body, and dragged the boy some 100 yards down the creek to a large sycamore, 26 feet in diameter at the base, hollow, and with a large opening on one side. Through this aperture, the monster attempted to enter with the boy, who by this time was almost dead with fright and unable to make any resistance. 3 men, Reverend Jacob Horn, George Patterson, and Alan Jordan, were quarrying stone a short distance above where the boys were fishing, and hearing their screams and seeing the creature yanking one off, hurried in an attempt to rescue the child. They reached the tree just as the snake, who, failing in its first attempt to drag the boy into his den, became alarmed, probably at the outcries made by its pursuers, unfastened its horrible fangs, and dropped the more than half-dead child to the earth. The little fellow was picked up and carried home, and Dr. Lukens of Waynesville summoned to attend him. In the afternoon, about 60 men, armed with clubs, dogs, axes, I don't know what the other part is supposed to be, gathered around the sycamore tree and concluded to cut it down and destroy its fearful tenant. They began cutting, when, becoming alarmed for his safety, the formidable snake leaped from the aperture, threw out its fore and hind legs, erected itself about 12 or 14 feet, and with the velocity of a racehorse, crossed the creek and ran up a small hill, climbed over a rail fence, breaking it down, and continuing north a mile, followed by the pursuers, until he reached a hole in a large hill under a heavy ledge of rocks. Some of the men and dogs were so terrified at the beast's first appearance that they only thought of getting out of the way, but the braver portion followed until the frightful thing made good his retreat underneath the ground. It will be watched for and killed if possible. It is described as being from 30 to 40 feet long, 16 inches in diameter, and the legs 4 feet long and covered with scales, the same as the body. Feet about 12 inches long and shaped like a lizard's, of black and white color with large yellow spots. Head about 16 inches wide with a long black forked tongue and the mouth inside deep red. It's pretty terrifying that they actually knew what the inside of the mouth was, because yeah, they must have been pretty close. The hind legs appear to be used to give it an erect position, and its propelling power is in its tail. Dr. Lukin said this morning that the boy, his patient, was badly bruised and scratched, horribly frightened, and that he lay in convulsions and spasms until 3 o'clock this morning, when he fell asleep, but frequently wakened with fright and terror. Yet the doctor thinks he will recover in a few days. The foregoing is vouched for by the persons whose names are given above, and many more can be given if necessary. The material points having been furnished your correspondent by Judge J.W. Keyes, one of our oldest and most influential citizens. So, the existence of some of the witnesses, like Dr. Lukin's, Judge Keyes, the Lynch family, named in the article, can be confirmed from the 1880 census. Oh, thankfully, it wasn't the 1890 census, because as we all know, all of those records were destroyed in a fire. Moving on, overall, the description given of the Ohio dragon sounds rather similar to a mushkushu, formerly Sarush, an animal repeatedly depicted in ancient Babylonian bas reliefs pictured below. These depictions have never been identified as being those of any living animal. No follow-up stories have been found other than this paragraph in the Inquirer. The Reverend Jacob Howe, Judge Keyes, Dr. Lukens, and others have received letters from all parts of the country making inquiries concerning the snake story published in the Inquirer of Monday last. For the benefit of the public, we state that Joseph Lynch, the boy referred to, is now able to walk about with the aid of a crutch, however, and a hunt is still going on for the venomous reptile. The Inquirer has been in universal demand here ever since, and the case has excited unprecedented talk. A story appearing a few days later in the Inquirer seems to cast some light on what this animal might have been. And this is, just wait till you hear what they think it was. It was a report from New York discussing a python in captivity there that had laid a clutch of eggs. The mother's length was given as 25 feet, so it's conceivable that an escapee python took up residence in the woods of Ohio. Pythons too have legs, albeit small ones that do not function in locomotion. So any such explanation fails to explain the 4-foot legs mentioned in the Inquirer report. We used to have 2 ball pythons as pets, and they do not have legs. I never even noticed a small one. They might be referring to what is known as spurs on snakes. They are not legs, and never would they be mistaken for legs. And they certainly weren't 4 feet long. But anyway, there's one last thing that I wanted to go over with you. So I wanted to, let me just finish this email here. Ohio is the home of over 10,000 mounds, so who knows what still lives there. I went to conferences called Nephilim Mounds in Newark, Ohio. The activity coming off the mounds can be seen at night, like little tornadoes coming off of them. I would love to see that. Absolutely. So I want to thank you for sending me that email. Now I just want to get to the comment that I decided to share with you today. And this was a comment on my recent video on deep underground military bases. And I found it to be extremely interesting, and I wanted to share it with all of you. And another thing that I wanted to say about my comments is that I read as many comments as I can, but sometimes they come so fast that I am not able to keep up with them, and I don't get notifications for all of them. So I just wanted to let you know that I do read the ones that I can, and I do respond when I can. But if I didn't respond, that does not necessarily mean that I didn't read it. It just means that at that point in time, I didn't have time to respond to it. But there are comments sometimes that really stand out to me, and I just have to screenshot them, and this was one of them. I typically don't chime in on these discussions, but I will add my experience. I am a senior level mechanical engineering student in a university. I often read the postings on the walls for engineering jobs and lectures. For the past 4 years, I have noticed a strange obsession with the government recruiting engineers for tunnel making. This isn't a small project localized to a single area. They are very clearly building a huge network of underground tunnels throughout the U.S. A few years back, there was an earthquake that was recorded by independent groups traveling from the East Coast to the West Coast in about 15 minutes. It maintained the same magnitude the entire route. This is about the same time and effect predicted for a hyperloop system. I do not believe these systems are exclusively military at this point. I think there is an active breakaway society living literally under our noses, which is exactly what we were talking about. We were talking about the shadow government and how there is an entire, they have apartments down there, they have nuclear power plants down there, they have everything down there. I don't know if it was nuclear. I know they have power plants down there. So absolutely, yes, there is a breakaway society there. Their ultimate goal appears to be a massive population reduction, after which they will emerge and basically be little g gods on par with the ancient gods. I do not think any of this will happen right away. It will be slow. They still have one major milestone to complete before they can move forward: space colonization. And I will say that at this point in time, I don't believe that space as it is presented to us exists. That's why all the most elite are obsessed with investing in space. Musk, Bigelow, Branson, Bezos, etc. They will ascend to space, possibly living within the lunar lava tubes to ride out the apocalypse, while their minions remain on Earth, within the Earth, away from the chaos being unleashed at surface level. This is even expressed throughout science fiction, particularly games like Fallout. So this part of the comment, while interesting, I don't believe in the heliocentric model. And so I do not believe that space as it's being presented in science class is what it actually is. I think at the very least, it could be what is maybe on the outside of the firmament. And maybe there would be some way to ride these lava tubes. I think that a lot of times when people say that they are going to quote space, that possibly they are just going outside of the firmament and not actually into an ever expanding universe. But with that being said, I trust what the Bible says, and I know who is going to win. So they can certainly try to, live out underground and everything, but it's not going to work. We all know, we all know who wins in the end. Anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.